I'm Dan Smolen. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolen from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful day. First off, to our friends down in Florida, the ones who have contacted me and said to me, Dan, I'm not going to be able to make it today. I think you guys have a pretty good excuse. I think what's most important is that you value your own safety. You can always watch the live show on playback. Take care of yourself and all who you love. Your property, that can come back. The rest of you, you need to take care of yourself. So please, please, please stay out of harm's way. Okay, listen, I am so excited to host this show and to co-host it with Mark and Fran. We could not build this community without you. This community of What's Your Work Fit has built organically, almost entirely through recommendations. But first off, if you are not already engaged with us, I ask that you follow us on the platform of your choice, or you could do both. We are on LinkedIn, and we are also on YouTube on the What's Your Work Fit channel. Follow or subscribe to us, and you will never miss future live shows, playback content, and written content. And furthermore, if you like what you get here on What's Your Work Fit, please do tell 5 of your friends to subscribe on the platform of their choice. Again, that's how we've built this community into something truly formidable. And I thank you for your continued viewership and listenership and support. Okay, it is with great excitement that I welcome our guest today, Steve King. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing well. You've already put a lot of pressure on me by saying with great excitement.
Well, I know and respect you, and I love the work that you're doing. Let's tell you a little bit about Steve. He is the founder and principal of Emergent Research. Steve identifies, analyzes, and forecasts the trends and shifts impacting the future of work, most notably around entrepreneurship, the gig economy, contract or what I call 1099 work, and also the impact on AI. You have a great field of view, sir.
It's a fun and interesting topic, and we've been at it for a long time here at Emergent Research.
Well, we're going to dig into that. I want to, excuse me, I want to welcome next our co-host. First off is Mark Gilbreath. How are you, Mark?
I'm super. Hey, Steve. Good to see you, old friend.
Good to see you, Mark.
And also Fran Saele. Good day, Fran.
Hi, Dan, and good to meet you, Steve. And I will tell you, I always am excited when I get to be with Dan. So it's just part of the show.
Well, that, you know, what can I say? Having a little technical difficulty here. Okay, let's get right to it. Our question today revolves around a topic that we haven't really heard a lot covered in a lot of future of work and workplace channels, but it's there. And that is entrepreneurship. As companies are imposing RTO policies, as people are concerned about perhaps commuting, long distances to and from the co-location. We're getting this feeling that entrepreneurship is bubbling. So to you, Steve, we asked the burning question, will 2025 be the year of the entrepreneur? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the quick answer is we've had a surge in entrepreneurship since sort of half to 3/4 of the way through the pandemic. And so, yes, 2025 will be but it's not the year. It will be roughly the third year in a row where entrepreneurship, small business formation, the number of independent workers has grown at a much faster rate than it did prior to the pandemic. And so my quick answer is yes.
Fran, what you got?
Jeff, interesting, Steve, following up on that, there's a lot of discussion about ways in which governments can assist the real estate industry, the commercial real estate industry, in terms of subordinated equity and incentives, things like UDAG from the past and various incentives. But we don't see anything like that being discussed today to drive entrepreneurship, to support starting new businesses. There's supports there, but in your opinion, is there enough, and should there be more given the volume of activity there?
Well, there's actually been a pretty strong growth in the support services from the government, and also more broadly enablement from the private sector for small businesses and entrepreneurship. And it's been growing steadily for well over a decade. And so do we need more? Absolutely. But if you kind of look at the government, the small business lending rules have gotten easier. The amount of money that's available has gotten greater. Many states have jumped in. Even local areas have jumped in to try to attract entrepreneurs, including programs like in Tulsa, where they'll pay you to come. They'll pay you to come live in the town for a year with the goal of hopefully staying. And there's actually kind of a global battle going on to attract digital nomads. And the plan on that is not so much that they want the digital nomads, all of them, but they do want the ones that they hope will stay and start businesses and create economic value. And so the programs have definitely gotten better, and dramatically better since we first started looking at this over 20 years ago. But is there room for more? Yes. And both presidential candidates have talked about the importance of entrepreneurship. Both have proposed increasing various tax credits and subsidies for them. And so it's a topic that is popular, and we're seeing more and more activity in that area from the government.
Hey, that's great to know, Steve, really. And by the way, on the Tulsa data, about 80% of the people that move there actually stay there, which I think is a phenomenal statistic. That's probably not true of some other places that have induced people to show up. But anyway, maybe just going back out to 30,000 feet, your business, Emergent Research, has been studying this for 25 years or so. And if you look at that timetable, you had 20 years of the more traditional period of work, and there was always an urge or a desire to do remote work, and we had a little bit of that. But then we had that tsunami of the pandemic, and there's been so much change. As you look at both sides of that period, the first 20 years and the 4 years since then, what can you tell us about? I mean, are we in a place where you expected us to be 20 years ago or 25 years ago? How is it different?
It's interesting. My wife and I formed Emergent Research, and we did it because we wanted to have more autonomy, control, and flexibility in our lives. Our kids were young, and in that sense, we set our business up as a goal where we would never have employees. We would use subcontractors. We would use other independents. We would work with other small businesses, and we've stuck to that. And in a lot of ways, we are precursors to. We weren't the only ones, obviously, but we were precursors to what a lot of people are talking about today. And if you sweep through that 20 years, we saw a surge of entrepreneurship after the Great Recession. in the middle of the Great Recession and afterwards. And self-employment, small business formation statistics actually got quite a bit stronger if you look at 2010 and 2011, but then reverted to the mean in 2012. And so as we went in and frankly grew at a lesser rate than it had in, say, in the 1980s and 1990s. And then you fast forward to 2020, tough year for everybody, but towards the end of 2020, going into 2021, we saw the beginnings of a surge. And small business formation rates, applications for tax IDs, we call business formation statistics, the number of independent workers, freelancers, 1099s, as Dan had mentioned, all of those have been surging since we. The small business data is a little behind because it's from 2022, but it's clear that the pandemic made a fundamental shift for now. Now, because of our experience in 2008 and 2009, and looking back in the data, recessions and economic events almost always lead to people reassessing their lives, reassessing what they want from their lives, and usually results in a surge, varying degrees of a surge, post that, whatever that shock is. The other one, of course, was 9/11. So the question is, does it revert to the mean? We actually, in 2022, we said, gosh, this just can't continue. It's just too much. Applications for new small businesses were literally up 50% over what they were pre-pandemic. Formations are from 2019 to this year, the number of independent workers basically doubled. The number of full-time independent workers, they're the 1099 people, a little more than doubled. We're saying those numbers can't continue, but so far we haven't seen the reversion to the mean. So yeah, it's been a pretty fundamental change. And if your job is forecasting and analyzing this stuff, it's been really fun. So
do a real short follow-up on this one. You've seen the emergence of business of startups in both periods, post 2008 and now. I'm curious, do you have any sense of how many of those businesses in the initial 2008 situation somehow early on got into office space to do work versus today?
So about 60 to 65% of small business startups. I mean, I'm sorry that this all gets very complicated. Well, we employer businesses, startups. So startups, like you think they're starting a regular business as opposed to being a freelancer or an independent consultant. Right. About 65% of those start in the home and eventually migrate into offices over a 3 to 5 year period. But since the pandemic and the shift to remote work, they've all started at home and they've been less likely to migrate. The other thing that's going on, and we can talk more about this later, we talk about enablement. Technology has made it cheaper and easier to do a startup, but it's also resulted in the need for fewer people in your startup. And so the average size of a startup's been falling regularly now since about 2010, and it was about 8 or 9 people in 2010, and today it's about 4 to 6 people. And so the startup need to move to the office has been reduced, and their need to move to a traditional office on the past path has been pushed out. So from the startup perspective, we don't dive deep into how that translates into real estate demand, but our assessment is from a startup perspective, there's less demand pressure from startups because they're staying remote and because they're smaller today than they were, say, 10 years ago.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Mark?
That's a great segue, Steve. I mean, for the dozen years that I've known you, you and Emergent have been following the co-working industry and flexible office industry and building very strong relationships with owners and operators. Traditionally, pre-pandemic, co-working was driven first and foremost by SMBs and freelancers and startups. We've been seeing a pretty dramatic uptick post-pandemic of enterprise adoption of flexible office because enterprises have been, in the wake of the recession, have been reassessing their portfolio strategies. Netting those two phenomena out, this post-pandemic move of enterprises toward flex and this resurgence again of a phenomena of entrepreneurship on the rise. What's your take on the sort of net implications for co-working operators? Which of those growing segments is going to be the primary headline for the average co-working operator?
So you've probably heard this story, Mark, but in 2007, we were invited to visit a place called the Hat Factory in San Francisco. And it was basically one of the first new wave co-working spaces. There'd obviously been executive office suites and startup thing. And we walked in and there was like 10 people there working, and we talked to the owner, and we walked out and we said, this is the future of real estate. Why in the world? Because we were involved with a lot of startups at that time, among other things. Why in the world would the startups that we've invested in would sign a 5-year lease? What could be stupider? And so since then, we've always felt there will be a time when corporations recognize this and push more towards flexibility. Not knowing anything about real estate, we didn't understand how many at the time, how many countervailing trends and issues there were with that. But certainly since the pandemic and the shift to remote work, we've seen more corporations tell us that they need places for their remote workers to work that aren't the office. And that's basically the co-working spaces. And we've always felt, you have, as a big corporation, you have an obligation to maintain the health of your employees when they're in their workspace. And mental health is a huge issue, and working alone leads to loneliness. It leads to a lot of other health problems. And so we've always felt that both in terms of just for the productivity and having the space and getting out of your house, because a lot of homes aren't conducive to working, coupled with the mental health issues that the lawyers would eventually make the lawyers and the HR people would say, we've got to offer co-working spaces to our employees. And it's been slow to get that way, but we are, and we have falsely predicted that this would happen in the past. But this time it seems to be really happening. Now, the 4 most wrong words in forecasting are, this time is different. And so when you say this time is different, there's a good chance you're wrong. But we are seeing the signs that, and we're seeing it in our data, more and more workers are reporting that they're spending time in co-working spaces than they were in the past. It's still a minority, but the co-working share, the share of workers saying that they're in co-working, and that's both the 99 world, and then we also do a lot of survey work with traditional employees. It's gone up since 2020 by about 35%. So and it was growing much slower prior to the pandemic. So the shift to remote work, the lack of need, I think, on corporations because they don't have people in the office nearly as much. But the productivity needs, the social needs, and the health needs lead us to believe that that's going to continue to be the case.
Do you think those two communities, the corporate worker that might be remote or distributed from a headquarters that needs a place to work, and the entrepreneur that's starting a company and wants to gather with their colleagues, will those two communities just blend and meld at the typical co-working space, or do you think we're going to see the emergence of two different sort of domains within the flexible office world that are specialized for those two distinct communities? Do you have a point of view?
I think we will see co-working spaces that, executive office suites traditionally went after corporates or at least larger small businesses more than the traditional co-working spaces did in the old days. I do think we'll see some specialization. We're going to offer the type of, some of the issues that the corporations are asking for, this better than I do, is around security, physical security, IT security. I think we will see some nichification of it so that some spaces will focus more on larger small businesses and corporations, whereas others will say, no, we really want to focus on the startups or independent workers, the 1099 folks. So I think we will see that. But The other side of it is if I'm a startup, I like being in a space with larger companies. If I'm an independent worker, I like it even more. I mean, we've seen the data. Our data has always been why, when we ask independent workers, why are you working in a co-working space? And the answer is leads. I run into people that can hire me every day. So I think we'll see a lot of spaces where the mixing occurs. And if you're a corporation, it's nice to be able to look up from your desk and say, I need a designer, and then say, oh, there's Ed. Come on in, Ed. Start designing. So I think the mixing is going to happen at most of them. But I do think we'll see niches on either side, with the majority is going to see the mixing. Yeah,
Steve, do you remember not long after Hat Factory in San Francisco, there was a fast-growing operator called RocketSpace. I don't know if you ever visited there.
Yeah, I did.
They're on Folsom, and what you just described was the whole strategy and ethos there. They were blending large Fortune 500 enterprise innovation teams with startups, and there was substantial commingling.
Yep.
And opportunity.
So I think they'll continue to be commingling. One of the interesting stats we have from ours, we've been asking for a long time, are your friends, how many of your friends are independent workers or working for a startup? And have you seen a bigger trend towards that? And when we first started doing it, about 12 to 14% back in 2012, said more of my friends are either independent workers or working at a small business and a startup. And today it's in the mid 40s. And so part of that is that blending's happening in real life and in neighborhoods and in communities. And that makes people more willing to go out on their own. But that same blending is definitely happening in co-working spaces.
I had opportunity, well before the pandemic hit. So it probably predated the Great Recession of 2007-08 to go visit a few of my friends at a facility called 1776.
Oh, sure.
On 15th Street in Washington, D.C., right downtown. Yep. And everything you just said, lead development, your leads are all in the room. Right. Ancillary resources. Oh, there's Ed over there. He's a terrific programmer. Let's go nudge him and see if we can draw him into our project. That place is still thriving. And what's really interesting is how, and I'm very familiar with that block because my first job out of college was right on 15th and L, three doors up from this facility. And what was really interesting is it turned a stodgy trade association heavy community into a thriving entrepreneurial oasis. Mm-hmm. So some really good stuff there. I want to get to Jackie Young's comment question. She said, I've always thought that being an entrepreneur is tied to the act of pursuing new ideas and new processes, not pursuing a style of work. However, given our topic today, she's wondering, are there different kinds of entrepreneurs motivated by different objectives? Are the outcomes the same, or are there new things? Do you have any thoughts on this, Steve?
Oh, gosh. The subsegments of entrepreneurship are numerous. And the two extremes are sort of the high growth tech entrepreneur who wants to build a very large business and is actively going for that. At the other end is a person who might have even a side gig or a part-time small business that meets their needs. And actually, if you talk to small business owners and you survey small business owners with less than 100 employees, most of them will tell you they're not interested in growing or not growing rapidly. They've accomplished their goals at the stage they're at, and they're pretty happy with that business. They're still going to want to grow a little bit so they can add more employees if they're an employer business. But most freelancers and independent workers will tell you, I don't even want to have one employee. I want to be on my own. Right. And I'm doing it for lifestyle purposes, is a very common answer. I'm doing it because I'm pursuing a specific passion. And if I grow, I will not be able to do the work that I like to do. I will end up having to manage people. I mentioned that we made the decision in our firm not to hire any people. It's because I had rolled out of a job where I was a divisional manager with 1,500 employees, and I was done with that. My wife had a smaller number of employees, but a similar issue. So yeah, there's a broad spread of entrepreneurs, and I would say that one of the most interesting part of our work is kind of quickly trying to, in our interviews and our meetings with them, what kind of entrepreneur are you? And the attitudes, risk profiles, and desires of these entrepreneurs vary dramatically. And so there's an entrepreneurial, you say, what is my work fit, right? There's a fit for everybody. And so everybody can be an entrepreneur and everybody can do it. A lot of people don't have the risk profiles to actually fully go out on their own. They like the perceived, we can talk about this later, but the perceived stability of traditional employment. But I have a side gig and I make jewelry and I sell it on Etsy. That's very common. All the way through to people that are saying, I'm going to roll the dice and try to go big. So that's a long answer, but there's a lot of different types of entrepreneurs.
I'm going to follow up with a couple of comments. One is that I'm kind of living some of the examples that you mentioned here. You talked about the side hustle making jewelry. Well, that's my wife, Marcia. We've had a side gig, if you will, for 30 years, selling vintage clothes and costume jewelry and ephemera and stuff like that. And that's going to be one of her full-time gigs when she retires from teaching next year. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be an easy pivot because the technology is there in place for us to run a retail business, Square. I keep it in my pocket, literally.
Right.
And if we pop up a store at an outdoor show, I'm ready to go. So that's really good. And so there are a lot of people that I talk to through the show that are doing a side hustle as a means of exploring something beyond their traditional scope. But then you have other people, Steve, and we've talked about this, who they quit a full-time employment situation. They're a full-time employee. They resign from that. And perhaps they become a 1099 doing the exact same work. The difference being they're now their own boss. Right. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that example and what kinds of insights you're learning.
Sure. Yeah, particularly since the pandemic, people are more focused on how work fits into their broader lives. And many people are deciding that it doesn't fit in very well if you have a traditional job. And we consistently hear the same things, and we have forever. It's about autonomy, control, and flexibility. Work-life autonomy, control, and flexibility. They might use some other word for that, but it comes down to those three. And what we've seen is a big increase in the number of people that are seeking that. But part of that is a belief that traditional jobs are not nearly as good as they used to be. In particular, job security. When we first started doing these studies in 2006 and 2007, the vast majority of Americans said traditional jobs are more secure than going out on your own. Mm-hmm. And when you interviewed people that were small business owners and independent workers, the 1099 group, they would agree with that. Today, 65% of independent workers say that being independent is more secure than a traditional job. And a little over a third of people with traditional jobs say that's true. And so one of the best selling points historically of traditional jobs has been stability, predictable income, and security. And they're no longer as stable. They're no longer as secure. And so that makes independent work much more attractive. And so we've seen a shift in risk profiles. We've seen a shift in the view of traditional jobs. And it's not that independent work has necessarily become better. It's what it's compared to in the eyes of American workers and workers around the world has become worse. And that's traditional jobs. And so that's been accelerated by the pandemic, of course, where a lot of people got laid off. But it was the same thing in 08-09 when a lot of people got laid off. So there's been some real attitudinal shifts, and I'll stop there. I can kind of drone on this topic for a long time. There's been some real attitudinal shifts that have started long term, but have been accelerated by the pandemic.
Fran?
Steve, I'm going to ask Mark Gilbreath a question because he just put it in our internal chat here. One of the things I remember about Jeff Bezos at Amazon was that he would encourage people to figure out a way to start a business and to leave Amazon. I mean, he was encouraging people to do that, and giving them money to go to school, doing anything that not anything, but he had a lot of incentive, and I think that's a great idea. I guess we call that entrepreneur. Or, Mark, help me. Intrapreneurship, where in organizations they're encouraging people to do something else and to be ready to step into some new role. Do you see that growing, and is that a good thing for organizations today? I assume so. But
a lot of organizations have programs for entrepreneurship. Google's famous for their 20% rule that they've kind of pushed, reduced, where you could spend 20% working on your own projects. Intuit Corporation encourages their employees to have side gigs because they serve small businesses. So we've seen that in a number of corporations, and given that stay lengths at companies are down to like 3.5 or 4 years, you want your employees to want to come back after they've left. And a growing number of companies are now more receptive to having boomerang employees. And so when that happens, you end up encouraging them to do more. I would say the entrepreneurship trend was really hot from 2012 to 2017. And then it's slowed down. A lot of companies announced programs and put groups together where you could more easily do that. That trend has shifted back. Starting about 2017 or 2018, there continued to be more focus on profitability and efficiency. It's like, Meta's famous, this is the year of efficiency.
Right.
And that cut down on these entrepreneurship programs. But a number of companies still have them.
Well, when you lay off 10% of your staff, I guess that sort of discourages the movement. So let me segue into a different question, but to some extent related. In our experience, in terms of revolutions and the way in which we live, people point to the Industrial Revolution, the Information Revolution, and of course now, it's hard to believe that it's only 10 months really that we've been in the AI revolution, the extent to which and the impact of which is yet to be really perceived in the business world. What's your view on AI as it impacts employees, entrepreneurs, and organizations? And what do you see there being a situation where there is going to be a large oversupply of talent because organizations will have automated those jobs that exist today? And what's going to happen with those people? What's your view? Are you fearful or are you optimistic?
Good question.
You can be both, because we're in a quantum world now. But
right.
Which one bothers you the most?
I grew up a statistician, and so I'm always in a quantum world because I'm probabilistic in my background. But I was gonna first off. I actually participated in the first wave of AI in the 1980s. I was the product manager on a rules-based system that was called AI, based on a product built at MIT in the late 80s. And so AI's actually been around a long, long time, but it's finally, and we often talk in the futurist world. I'm not really a futurist, but futurists talk about in the futurist world that like show business, it takes a long time to become an overnight success with trends, and AI has become an overnight success. So I am a techno optimist by nature, and it's based on my experience. So at least in the short run, the next 3 to 5 years, I'm not too worried about job loss. You can't forecast out beyond 3 to 5 years because the technology is moving too quickly. So I'm a little more pessimistic long term. But in the short run, we're like everybody else. We're diving deep in this on a regular basis, and what we're finding so far is it's a great tool to help people. It makes people more productive, and if you're joining the revolution and becoming more productive using generative AI tools, you're probably going to do okay, at least for the next 3 to 5 years. If you're not joining the AI revolution, there's a good chance you're going to be replaced by someone who has. Mm-hmm. And so it's like traditional automation works so far. We did for one of our clients, we did an interesting project where we did the same project. It was a market analysis project. We did it 3 different ways. We did it our old-fashioned way. We did it using AI as a tool, and we did it assigning AI the task of doing the project. And we came back, and what we found was, for us at least, great results. We're not worried about AI at all in our work. It just doesn't yet have the sophistication or skill set. Their high level results looked pretty good, but as you got into the results, they were terrible. It did improve our productivity like 20 to 25%. So we immediately realized if we don't change our pricing, we have a 25% margin increase. So we love it. And I think for a lot of jobs, it's going to be that way. Now, there's the advancements are amazing. And there's now this term agentic AI, which just simply means AI agents that are able to execute workflows on their own. That's going to change a lot of jobs. But there's also this term in economics, and I started my career as an economist, called the Jevons paradox, which is automation often results in decreasing costs, which results in increasing demand for even human labor. And early in my career, I worked for Lotus Development, Lotus 123, Lotus Notes.
Remember that?
And at that time, everybody thought spreadsheets was going to really dramatically reduce the number of people doing financial analyst work because it was automating so much of the work. Well, guess what happened? It made it cheaper and easier. We started doing more financial analyst work. Instead of asking for one what-if assessment that would be done by paper and a calculator, managers started asking for hundreds of what-ifs. And spreadsheets actually turned into a tool that resulted in the most massive growth in financial analysis in human history. So it's not clear that AI is going to do that, but it's already showing some signs. The sign that I like the most is I was in a meeting the other day and I asked the CTO of a company, how is AI affecting their programming skills? And they said, well, last year we were up in productivity 50%. This year it's up to 100% productivity increase. So I said, well, what does that mean for people? And he said, we've got to hire a ton of people because we can now program a bunch of things that we weren't able to program before because they cost too much. And I said, so you're not laying people off? And he goes, no, and we can't hire them fast enough. Now, will that pan out across the economy as AI gets better, when if we ever get to, Star Trek level AI, generalized intelligence, what will that do? That's too far out to forecast with any meaning. But in the short run, my advice to everybody is you better learn how to use it, and you better learn how to make yourself more productive using it. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hard time competing with the people that are.
Great answer. Thank you.
Mark?
So we got automation continuing to come at us. You got your Jevons paradox, which seems to suggest, and your anecdote just referenced this, that automation brings with it even an appetite for even more people, or can in some cases.
Can. No promises.
We've got every once in a while, whether fad or reality, sort of some zeal around entrepreneurship. Build new things, try new things. There's an emotional, cultural aspect to that, I think. I'm curious how, and then we have the emergence of really powerful AI applications and tools, right? And there's a toolkit that can be a force multiplier. So automation, AI tools, zeal around entrepreneurship. How might those sort of 3 dynamics, Steve, kind of square with companies that have moved toward hybrid and distributed work? And and are they do they play nicely together? Will those phenomena steer companies to be even more committed to hybrid and distributed work, or are they not correlated, do you think?
Yeah. So you talked about 3, and then you added hybrid, the 4th, and all 4 are happening at the same time. And within that, there's also sort of a a trend that's going on related to those, which is work is becoming more taskified instead of jobified. And so I'm no longer just a marketing person. I might be assigned to other things, and all of this is making organizational boundaries more permeable. By that I mean moving in and out. And so you have the result on work is you have these work teams that are comprised of non-employee labor, in addition to, it could be customers, it could be suppliers, it could be independent, it's likely independent workers. And you're right, they're working hybrid, they're facing AI introduced into it. And so team management and corporate management is going through a massive set of changes, although nature of human beings, not as fast as the technology is changing. So all of those things are happening. Without a doubt, we've done a number of studies showing that remote work leads to greater use of 1099 labor, non-employee labor, because if your employee is already remote, that's one less reason why you shouldn't use an independent worker. Before, a lot of times when we would ask corporations, why aren't you using 1099s or freelancers or consultants, they would say, well, they're not in the office, they're not in our meetings, they're not. So hybrid work's definitely having an impact on that and increasing the use of non-employee labor. These things, one of the things that's most interesting about trends is when you see a group of converging trends interacting with each other, almost like simultaneous equations. Generally speaking, that accelerates all of the trends above. So we're seeing massive convergence now among the trends you just mentioned, Mark.
In that quick follow-up, in that convergence, if I've got automation that's driving an appetite for more labor, and I've got AI tools and, let's say, AI skills that need to come along with that, the know-how and the willingness to use those tools, and then I've got corporations that are leaning heavily into hybrid and distributed work and need to develop the management competencies around that.
Mm-hmm.
So we got labor in quantity, we've got AI skills for the labor, and we have management skills. Which of those in that convergence, where's the scarcity going to be? What's going to be in short supply? Is it going to be the magnitude of labor? Will it be labor's ability to develop AI skills? Will it be management's ability to rethink what it means to run an organization with those other dimensions converging? Does that make sense?
Well, if you ask corporate leaders, they'll tell you right now skills shortages is the biggest problem. In terms of what we're talking about right now. They might mention inflation, geopolitics is the general one, but in terms of skill shortages in certain areas, it's very, it's hard to find. It's still hard to find programming talent, engineering talent, logistics. The logistics world is going through a massive change because of supply chain changes. Logistics people are in short demand. Marketers skilled in digital marketing. It's hard, we've been doing digital marketing for a long time, but we've got shortages of those marketers. So skill shortages are a problem. And then they're all looking at each other going, and now we have AI, where the heck do we get these people? And to actually hire experienced people that are actually experienced at the heavy technical level of AI, the salaries are unbelievable right now out here in the Bay Area. I mean, they get to write their own ticket. So and the demand is huge. So it's skill shortages in the near term. And then you kind of hope AI will help with that. And we have demographic issues as a country and as a globe where the people aren't located or easily accessible or have the skill sets relative to where the demand is. And so we have that problem too. So I'd say skill shortages first. The second thing is we are not skilled or trained as managers aren't skilled or trained all the way up through senior executives of dealing with all of this. There's a lot, suddenly instead of command and control, you're dealing an ecosystem of people that may or may not work for you, and they're all over the place. And so there's a huge problem with management right now. And one of the reasons if you look at why are people burned out, why are people having, don't like their traditional jobs, it almost always goes back to the manager's not very good. And historically, managers haven't been very good, but they're really not good now. And it's not their fault. I mean, all these changes are hitting them really fast too. So I would say skill shortages first, and and management capability second, in answer to your question.
So, Steve, I want to get to two final viewer questions. The first, well, it's a comment from Jillian, who says, I know so many women who are tired of trying to fit into the narrow spaces that corporate life offers. They're opting out. It's not easy, but they feel that it's worth it. And then I want to bring up Christine, who is a solopreneur, who says that leaving the corporate environment, not giving into what others demanded, and having my own voice changed my entire life. So let's talk about women in your research, because I'm feeling from my purview that it's women, especially in the executive ranks, who are, in many cases, they're also caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be closer to their loved ones. Perhaps they have young children. Perhaps they have parents they have to care for. And being tied to a co-location and a long commute is going to eventually be for them a deal breaker. But then there's the other aspects of, as a woman, how do they feel they're growing in their own career, and could they be doing a more successful outcome if they were on their own, as running their own startup, as a 1099, even side gigging some of their work? What are your thoughts?
So there's a lot of data on caregiving, and it's very clear, women have an outsized role in taking care of children, taking care of elderly relatives, taking care in general, and it's gotten better. The way I would describe it in a baseball term is the women are on third base and the men are halfway down the first base path. So it's still, we've gotten better. We're all men here in this one. We've gotten better as a collective sex, but we're still way behind. So they face more of these pressures, and the response has been, there has been, women have been, their interest in entrepreneurship and self-employment has been growing for a long time, and they are more of the pandemic accelerated them more than men in terms of starting their own small businesses or becoming an independent worker.
Right.
So we've seen that. We've definitely seen that change. And obviously the corporate world isn't always conducive to female participation. And the biggest way in our data we see that is, we ask a series of questions in our surveys about, can you be your authentic self? Can you live your authentic life?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, a lot of men say no, but a much higher percentage of women say no. They can't live their life. They burn out. They can't be authentic. They have to deal with all the various issues associated with that. Minorities also
Right.
can't be as authentic. So yeah, I mean, it's the growth of women entrepreneurs is strong. It's not overwhelming male entrepreneurs, particularly as you get to bigger small businesses. There's a lot of barriers still for women, but in the independent worker world, the 1099s, they actually slightly outnumber the number of men doing it, and same thing's true in side gigs.
Interesting. So we've come to the end. We've run out of time, and I get to ask you our final question, Steve King, which is, what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many other wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
Well, we as I said, as I started this, we started this as a lifestyle business. If any of our clients are listening, you didn't hear that. But we started it as a lifestyle business with the goal that my wife and myself would each roughly have a half-time job, so that we could each participate in other activities that were important to us, and many of those are joint. And it's a client-based organization. We can't fully do that. We have times when we're both working really long weeks and such, but we have been able to stop work a few weeks before Christmas, not start until mid-January, take a lot of time off in the summer. I'm golfing today. So we've been able to fit the rest of our life, and it was driven initially by our children who are now, full adults. And so they're not an issue anymore. But our work fit is find work that we like doing, find work that engages us, and build a life where we have some flexibility around doing that. And also participating in the other aspects of our life. Now we have a bunch of advantages, and because of our initial backgrounds, but that's our work fit. Our work fit is, and we're very picky about the work we do because we're only interested in doing work that we're interested in. And we're fortunate that we're at a stage where we can do that.
That's just wonderful. Hey, before we depart, could you please point our listeners and viewers to where they can find you on social media and perhaps have a conversation?
Yeah, I'm primarily on LinkedIn, and I'm Steve King, Emergent Research will find me. And that's where I am mostly today. I'm also on the platform formerly known as Twitter, X as @SmallBizLabs, but I don't participate there nearly as much as I do LinkedIn.
Well, Steve, this has been an absolute blast. We thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope we can get you back at some future point to continue what is a growing story in the future of work and in workplace. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Stick around for the after party.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.